Welcome to my shop. My name's Guy, and this is the first in a series of videos I'll be doing here on simplecove.com. I'm going to be building a chisel cabinet. The overall dimensions of a cabinet are 26.5 by about, I think, 17 inches wide. I've already selected the material. It's all rough right now, and I'd like to zoom in a little bit closer and show you what my method is on picking out the lumber for this project. Well, this is the bulk of the material I have for the cabinet. The back and the shelves are going to be made out of ash. Now I've got the ash picked out here ready. I do not have the ash picked out for the panel in the back yet. But the rest of this is the panel for the door on the front. This is the top of the cabinet. Those are the sides, and back there are the rails and stiles for the door of the cabinet. Let's take a look a little bit closer at the ash that I have for the project. These are going to be the shelves. Actually, I only need a bottom, a middle shelf, and a top shelf. I've got enough for 4 pieces here just in case I screw something up. The grain direction on this is not too important, but it still kind of is. This is cut from the same board, which I do like. Now these pieces are going to be the rail and stile for the back. I'm going to be doing a framed back on the cabinet. And if you look at this, these were cut off the edge of a board, and all the grain is running really straight on this for the most part. And that's nice because when I do the back, it's going to be a book matched. I'm going to do the cathedrals on it. I don't want to take away from that by having any grain that's kind of wavy or cathedral or anything else on the sides and the bottom. So this is going to be for the rails and the stiles. Let's take a look at the walnut. Now this piece is going to be the top. I'm really not very concerned about the grain pattern on this. You really won't see it unless you're standing on something looking down, but it'll still look good. This is going to be for the door. Now the final dimensions on the door are going to be a 1/2 inch thick for the panel anyways. And I picked this piece because I can get it to the width I want, plus it's got a nice cathedral. It's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to draw it out here. That goes about 3/4 of the way up it, and that's going to be perfect after I resaw this and book match it. Now these are going to be for the case sides. I need 2 pieces, about 5 inches wide, I think. Yeah, 5 inches wide. Again, I'm not too awfully concerned about the grain pattern for this. As long as I have some nice figure, some cathedral, some straight grain, that's fine. This is going to look fine. Now this is going to be for the rails and stiles of the door of the cabinet. This, again, just like the pieces of ash I showed you, is all nice straight grain. So again, this will not take away from anything on the panel itself. Now another thing I like to do after I rough cut these out of the boards is I mark in permanent marker on the ends what the pieces are going to be. So large projects, it's very easy to forget what you've done with what, but there's very little chance of me removing these marks during the milling process. Again, just a very simple thing. I'm ready to start the milling process. I'm ready to go over to the joiner here. But before I do, I want to do 2 things. First, I want to make sure that when I put this on the joiner bed, which has a nice flat face, that these don't rock, because if it's cupped, bowed, or twisted, all I'm going to do is just continue to make a big pretzel out of this thing. So this board here, for example, you can see when I press down on these 2 corners right here, it rocks quite a bit. Now when I flip it over, it doesn't move. So that means that when I run this through, it's going to stay flat. Now in a case like this board here, now this is pretty nice and solid right now. This is the other side. There's no way I'd send that through the joiner. And to get this side so it's acceptable to run through the joiner, I had to take a hand plane and knock down this corner first. So there is some hand plane work involved even when you're doing milling with machines. So let's go over to the joiner and we'll start doing this. Now, I'm over here at the joiner. I do want to mention one more thing. I'm blessed to have an 8-inch joiner, and I do have a helical head. Which is nice because it prevents about what I'm going to talk about next, which is grain direction when you're feeding these boards. Now if you have straight knives on your joiner, you have to pay real attention to the way the grain goes. And not necessarily because the cathedrals are going this way and pointing down here, that means that the grain is going this way and you can push it that way. What you really have to do is look at the sides. Now it's hard to see on camera here, but this grain is actually running this way. So what I want to do when I put this on the joiner is I want to make sure that the heads are scooping this side so I don't tear anything out. The knives are going downhill. So when I put this on here, actually I have to flip it around like this for my flat face, and I put it on the joiner, I run it through, I make sure that I keep that direction going until I've got a flat face. Now the joiner is a pretty simple machine, but there's a little bit of technique to it. Put that in there. So when you're pushing it through, I always use push pads. I never use my hands on a joiner. I saw a really bad accident once in shop class in 8th grade. I always think of that. So what you want to do is make sure that when you're pushing on here, it does not rock at all. It doesn't really matter if it's up tight to the fence or not, but as you push it through, when you get to the other side, this is the reference face to the blade. So you want to make sure after you feed it through that you keep putting pressure on this side or the outfeed side of the joiner table, and that'll give you a nice flat cut. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start milling this one board here, and I'm going to keep going on. I'm taking almost somewhere between a 32nd and a 16th of an inch off, so that would be whatever. Anyways, so I'm going to keep pushing it through till I know this face here is perfectly flat. So as you can see, I've taken away all that rough grain of this, and this is what the top is going to look like. So I know that's my reference face, and I always mark it with this little squiggle so I know that's the reference face. Now while I have the joiner set up and I am doing this, I am going to go ahead and do an edge joint also. It's basically the same operation, but instead of putting it on the face of the table, I'm going to go up against the fence. I also made sure that my fence was 90 degrees to the outfeed table. Again, the outfeed table is what everything is referenced off of. So this to the blade, this to this. So when I push this through, I'm going to push it through, and I'm going to maintain pressure on the outfeed side. So now that I've run that through, I know this face is parallel or is perpendicular to this face, and I checked it with my square, and it's a nice perfect 90 degrees, which is what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to melt the rest of the boards. Well, here's the situation a lot of people run into. I've got an 8-inch joiner, which is realistically about 7 3/4. And I've got this board which is, oh geez, I don't know, maybe 9.5 inches, close to 10 inches wide. It's 9 inches wide. It's going to go way off the end of this. So how do I get this flat? It's actually pretty easy. The first thing I need to do is I'm going to take off the guard. And then I'm going to lower my table so I take about a 1/16 of an inch off. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the flat face, I'm going to run it over here, and I'm going to gouge as much as I possibly can off this piece, and I'll be left with a little lip right here. So that's step number one. And if you take the blade guard off on this thing, be very, very careful. Use push paddles. Keep your hands away from that thing because it will chew your fingers up. So now what I've got here is I've got a flat face and I've got this ledge that's right here that I need to take off. Now I can do that with a hand plane, which I really don't feel like doing. I have another method I'm going to show you when I get to the part where I'm actually going to put this through the thickness planer. So here's all the boards. I've got one face flat and I've got one edge jointed. And again, these are all perfectly perpendicular to each other. Now what I need to do is go to the thickness planer. Thickness planer works, instead of the knives being on the bottom, they're on the top. And when I push these through, it's going to reference off of the flat face that I have right now and take off the top until it matches this and it's completely parallel. Well, I told you before that I would show you how I deal with this board that's got the ledge. I've got this piece of plywood I keep in my lumber rack, and I put some double-sided tape down on here. Just going to peel this off and then put that on here and press it down. Now when I put this through the joiner, I'll put this on the bed and this will ride through, and once I get this top part flat, then I can go underneath and get rid of that other piece. I've got the planer set, and it's pretty simple. The reference face, which in this case is this wider board, will go underneath here, and I'll start scooping off material on top till this is flat. I've taken the board off and the tape, and this is what I'm left with. I still have that ledge, so I'm going to take this, using this face as a reference now, and get rid of that. I want to keep this board as thick as possible because this is the board that's going to be resawed and book matched for the door. So those are going to be a 1/2 inch, and I want to keep that as thick as possible for right now. So I'll finish cleaning this up on the thickness planer. Well, I've got both sides of this board thickness now, and it's about 1 3/16 of an inch. Yeah, 1 3/16. Again, this is the final dimensions on this is going to be a 1/2 inch after I book match it. So hopefully this won't move too much. I'm going to set this aside for right now, and then I'm going to continue to do these other boards. Now, when I do these other boards, it's going to be the same thing as this. All I want to do is just get them flat and parallel on both sides. I do not want to take them to final dimension yet. By the time I get done with these, they're going to be around, I think, around 7/8 of an inch. After I get done with these and get them both sides thickness, then I'll sticker them for at least a day before I start working with them again. Well, I've got all the boards planed down to 7/8 of an inch, except for this one, which I mentioned was like 1 3/16. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set these aside. I'm actually going to put stickers underneath them and let them sit overnight. I'm going to mill these again, but I'm not going to mill them again until I'm actually ready to use them. They'll remain in the stickers. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I think that's going to be it for today.